I'm going to give a talk on new directions in fetal Down syndrome research, and I'm Paddy Jim Baggot. The name Paddy Jim. My father was a crusty old, very conservative Irish Catholic from Dublin, Ireland, and he had 11 kids, and he went to Mass every day with my mother together for 50 years. So that's where I come from. And he opposed the sort of pro-abortion hegemony of our Catholic hospital and our town. And so he was a defender of the right to life, and so am I. In my training, when I was doing my OB residency, we had a perinatologist, and if women would have a baby with a bad diagnosis, they would go in a room with him, and who knows what was said in that room, but when they came out, they never, ever kept their baby. And so I thought, you know, if there's going to be a choice, there ought to be more than one choice. And so I thought, you know, I could see a need here that I would want to be a pro-life version of him. And toward the end of my training, we got a lecture from this guy, Mark Evans, who is one of the, you know, sort of like leading lights of obstetrics. He was an obstetric geneticist, and he was talking about all sorts of very ambitious technological things, but like almost all the OB geneticists, he was not at all pro-life. And so I thought, you know, he's very skilled and knowledgeable, but there needs to be a pro-life version of him. So that was how and why I did my training. And I did my fellowship in maternal-fetal medicine, then in genetics, and at that time, the gene therapy was the hot thing. And so when I came to do research, I went to this genetic research organization. I said, I got a great idea for you. Let's do something with fetal gene therapy. And they told me, why don't you think about Down syndrome? I'm like, Down syndrome, are you kidding me? Because when we were in medical school, what we were taught was that anything that was either neurologic, genetic, or developmental was hopeless. But anyway, I said, okay, I'll write you a grant. So Down syndrome has typically IQs are 25 to 75. So I didn't really know what those numbers meant. So here's what they mean. 25, you might be in an institution wearing diapers. 75, if you try to take the subway, you'll usually get to the right place. So people have been thinking about what is the cause of this disease, and you could say that there's one extra chromosome number 21, 3 instead of 2. And so that would mean that there's also one extra copy of each gene on that chromosome. So if you state the problem as one extra chromosome, you're stating in a way that there's no solution to that problem. But if you state it as one extra gene on each chromosome, one extra copy of each gene, then you could start to take each gene, gene by gene, and start to see if you can solve something. So this is called the gene dosage effect, the idea that there's a 50% increase in all the gene products in Down syndrome. And the children with Down syndrome, they do excel in one way. The ability to love and be loved, and they're often models of unconditional love, which really maybe we need a little bit more of that in society today. For many years, people trying to think about what is the cure for Down syndrome. You know, it's this, it's that. And none of them really worked out. But over time, their longevity has been increasing, their neurologic performance has been increasing. They used to all die at the age of 20. So I think a first idea is let's, you know, see, it doesn't have to be one silver bullet. It never has been. Maybe for pneumonia, yeah, give antibiotics, but this might be a more complicated problem. So small improvements like ear checks, eye checks, thyroid, infant stimulation, they've been generally doing better. And for each one of these things, it would be better to light one candle than curse the darkness. And over time, one candle, 2, 3, 4 starts to add up. So this is the beginning of my research. What I did in my research is my genetic training was at a place where they had a lot of inborn errors in biochemical genetics. And so I said, what if we think of Down syndrome not as a chromosome disease, but a biochemical genetic disease? So first question, is there a folate deficiency in Down syndrome? Now, of course, when I was in medical school, we had this guy called Fast Eddie Titchener, and he would erase with one hand and write with the other hand. And at the end of an hour, you had written as fast as you could write, and you had no concept what was said, and nor you had any tension either thinking about it. So, but actually, in biochemistry, there are a lot of solutions that none of us really learned or were taught because we were taught just like that. Folate, B12, B6. These all involve your monocarbon metabolism. That means whenever you want to add one carbon or subtract one carbon to build or take apart molecules, you could see this could be handy and important. It could be you have to have monocarbons to make DNA, RNA, proteins, and how about that? Neurotransmitters. Monocarbons could be important, and for various reasons, it's always been some type of a problem in Down syndrome. They have increased MCV, and they're particularly sensitive to methotrexate. So now, some of the biochemistry I know as a practicing physician, there's obscure and crazy names that your eyes glaze over when you hear them. So whenever I say something like that, just forget about it. It doesn't really matter. They're all just markers. So the folate marker is FIGLU. And this marker will be increased in folate deficiency. So what did we find when we looked at amniotic fluid from fetuses with Down syndrome? What we found is it was decreased. So conclusion, there's no folate deficiency. Why was it decreased? After a long time after we started the work, someone published that that gene was on chromosome 21. So it was a gene dosage effect, which made it go down instead of up. So that was, I think, the first paper where people actually asked themselves about the biochemistry of metabolism of Down syndrome in the fetus, because there's an enormous quantity of literature on Down syndrome in the fetus, but it's all about prenatal diagnosis, and rarely does anyone ask what's actually going on with this disease. We did some other work that showed an elevation of vitamin B2 deficiency markers. So we could say that from the evidence that we have, it looks like these fetuses are relatively deficient of vitamin B2. And you think about what are these two groups? The fetuses with Down syndrome and the fetuses without Down syndrome. Well, they're both taking prenatal vitamins. So one thing that you could see here is you could have vitamin deficiencies despite taking a prenatal vitamin every day. Okay, does vitamin B2 affect brain function? Yes. Okay, so here, this is a correctable problem. This is potentially one candle. Are they all going to go to medical school if they start taking vitamin B2? Of course not. But it's something that could help. Vitamin B6, children, this is data from a long time ago. There's the idea of treating kids with Down syndrome is very politically incorrect, and a significant amount of literature would say that only a moron would even try to do such a thing. So it's kind of been suppressed. But anyway, there was some literature from a long time ago about oxalate, a B6 marker. And in that literature from a long time ago, they showed things like brainstem evoked response improved. There were some mild improvements. I mean, obviously, they didn't all start going to college, but there were some mild improvements. And B6 is necessary to convert tryptophan to serotonin. So it's not necessarily just trivial. So we found that the Down syndrome fetuses had elevated oxalates, which suggested they're deficient of B2. And so it's a correctable problem. You know, this one we could correct. We looked at carbohydrates or sugars. We found no difference, but at least we looked. And now this is one of those biochemical terms which will make your eyes glaze over. But this one here is one that we've all heard of. This guy called Kilmer-McCulley said you could prevent heart attacks by giving B6 or B12 or folate. In other words, all the monocarbon players. So our research here, all right, so the gene for this is on chromosome 21. So if there's a gene dosage effect, then that means that these two are decreased as the enzyme is accelerated and the products are increased. And so mostly that's what we found. The serine did go down, the cystathionine and cysteine did go up, but the homocysteine, instead of going down, it went up. So we think what happened is it's not a folate deficiency, it's not a B12 deficiency, it could be the B6 deficiency that we had previously demonstrated. Now, these ones will really make your eyes glaze over. Biotin-related metabolites. This enzyme, all it does is it converts biotin to its active form. Now, what is biotin? Biotin helps you put on carboxylate groups. If this enzyme was accelerated, then the substrates are markers of biotin deficiency. They should fall, and in our data they did. And so a gene dosage effect was confirmed. Now, biotin is extremely safe, and one could certainly, with complete safety, take 1,000 times the RDA. So what we found here is that this enzyme is accelerated, and the clinical significance of that is it would simulate biotin excess, but that is not really a problem. So this is of some maybe genetic or biochemical interest, but clinically this won't make any difference. So what have we learned? There are some potentially correctable problems in fetuses, and also maybe the treatment could begin before birth. Now in the past, there were some who said that vitamins were beneficial in Down syndrome, and if you would stand back, you would think that for many, many, many diseases, vitamins will have some beneficial interest, and for most diseases, they're not going to be decisive. You know, you're not going to take a vitamin if you got appendicitis. So we should, you know, try to consider these claims in reasonable context. So some people said vitamins were helpful, some people said they were worthless, but most of these studies are done on older children and adults, very late in brain development. So maybe the timing was missed by both. Maybe these two people are yelling and shouting at each other for decades and they got the timing wrong. So maybe we could reimagine Down syndrome as a problem in brain development. So brain development is a physiologic process, and as doctors, we're physiologic engineers. Maybe we could even have some influence on that process. If we look at the micropathology, what we would find is if we would take common causes of mental retardation like Down syndrome or hypothyroid or any of these, you look at the brain under the microscope, you'd say, they all look the same. The dendrites are not as developed as they should be. So dendrites could be the anatomic substrate of intelligence. And dendrites, one can think of brain cells as like a tree. The dendrites would be the arms reaching out to other cells to receive communication. And the synapses are the connections between cells. And on the dendrites are subcellular processes called terminal boutons. So we can think of a brain cell as like a tree. and the tree branches, dendrites. And this analogy of brain cells as trees comes from Marianne Diamond, a neuroanatomist from UCSF. And so this could give us a concept that we could work with. So trees need water and fertilizer for growth. Brain cells need nutrition to grow and develop. Trees could be inhibited by herbicides, toxins. Brain cells could be stunted or killed by toxins. The tree growth is influenced greatly by the presence of light. Brain cells grow and develop with education. In the absence of light, leaves will fall and trees may not develop, and with absent education, there will be limited brain development. And so then we could get to the concept of use it or lose it. Imagine that there was a circuit diagram for the computer which is between your ears. The circuit diagram would be so large it would be like a small city or a major university. How would all that information fit on your chromosomes? It couldn't. So the guy that designed this was more clever, and what you do is you make a lot more brain cells than you really need. The ones you're not using, you lose. You make a lot more helper or glial cells than you really need, and then you lose the ones that are not being used. Dendrites, synapses. So in the main, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. But the flip side of that is, if you do use it, then you'll keep it and grow it, and your brain could grow like a muscle as you use it. And in fact, it's true throughout the entire lifespan. All of us are learning things all the time. The anatomic substrate of that is in your dendrites. You're still developing your brains today. And so also, that means that education, it's not just knowledge. Education changes the structure of the brain, just as light would a tree. And so then we could have practical ways to enhance brain development. There was an OB doctor called Rene Vandekar who advanced the idea that learning could begin before birth. Some fetuses have heard songs while in the womb and remembered them decades later. Some cultures typically practice prenatal learning, like these cultures. And if you know anybody's pregnant, you could try this. If when the baby kicks, the mother would say, kick, 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 then that means that the baby learns what the word kick means. The mother could then command the baby to give a kick, and the baby could follow a command. And this could happen, in the early third trimester. So, and there's a study by some guy called Fuentes, prenatally played classic music enhanced the motor development 7 months after birth. So you could talk, read, count, sing, and dance with your fetus, and this could benefit the brain development. Postnatally, there was a guy by the name of Glenn Doman and many of his imitators and colleagues who began teaching infants shortly after birth. You could have them crawling. You could do balance exercises, like if you would take your baby and swing it around, or if you're a little bit more brave, you can throw them. It stimulates the balance, and you'll see the benefit in these because when the children become a little bit older, like my children, they love to do somersaults. I don't know how to do that. I could never do it. But they had some balanced vestibular training, and so it's more natural to them. Babies could read if you presented it in a way they could understand it. If we look back there, we see big exit signs, huge bright letters. If the room was filled with smoke, you might still see them. So with huge bright letters, babies could read. But the type of newsprint that we read, they could not read that. They could learn to count with large red dots. And so if we would understand the capabilities of babies, we could see that they would have a lot more capabilities than we think. And one time I went to a course where they taught me how to teach children all these things at very young ages. And they showed us a 3-month-old who, by pointing to a choice board, like no, yes or no, maybe or I don't know, and the 3-month-old could answer questions logically and be right. There's very little data on this. This is only data I could find. Unfortunately, there's no controls. But using this Doman style, teaching the babies everything from early on, well, at least the parents thought they were doing very well. And there is definitely data that you can find that any child that could read by the age of 3 will have a significant and permanent enhancement in academic performance for the rest of its life. So any baby that can read by 3 will do well in college, and every point in between. Yeah, actually, one time I was at Knights of Columbus, and my wife was telling this teacher that my daughter was reading, and the teacher said, "Oh, you must be mistaken. She's just memorizing words." You know, imagine the arrogance of this lady telling my wife without having even met my daughter. Okay, so the brain needs nutrients. You might think that we adults, we don't have any really significant nutrient deficiencies. However, we are very different from fetuses. A fetus will increase its weight from 20 weeks to 40 weeks. It will grow from 200 grams to 4,000 grams. So it will increase its weight 20 times in 20 weeks. There is no adult that can grow at that rate. So while nutrition is relatively less important for us, even though it's still important for us, but for fetuses and embryos, it's a totally different concept of importance. Toxins. All of us are filled with toxins, neurotoxins. Virtually all toxins are neurotoxins. Hundreds of neurotoxins will be found in any adults, and these studies have been done. Hundreds of neurotoxins will be found in any fetal amniotic fluid and umbilical cord blood. So if there are neurotoxins there, then some improvement could be done by lessening those neurotoxins. There's some literature on maternal thyroid hormone and infant intelligence, and other literature from a very long time ago by this lady, Kay Dalton. Now people use progesterone liberally to prevent premature labor, but from a long time ago, Kay Dalton's data says that fetuses exposed to progesterone in the womb had enhanced intelligence many years later. And going back to Mary Ann Diamond with rat brains, she would say that maternal progesterone would increase the cerebral cortex 6%, which is as much as any manipulation that she could do. Breastfeeding increases bonding. The bonding itself will enhance brain development. Breast milk contains DHA, which enhances vision and neurologic performance, and the immunoglobulins in breast milk can prevent 30 diseases in baby. Now, I recently learned about the work of Pierre Marois, and what he does for the most part is he uses hyperbaric oxygen and he does this in cerebral palsy. Actually, there are many, many studies on this, mostly done out of China, that hyperbaric oxygen has a very beneficial effect on cerebral palsy. In his work, he's treated 1,000 patients. He's published 250 patients in 3 trials, one of which was in The Lancet. And so in his work on cerebral palsy, what he found is it improves spasticity and gross and fine motor, but look here, cognition, language, attention, and development. And he says often substantial improvement. And there's various theories about why this might work, or it might have several mechanisms why it worked. It may be that idling neurons that were not actually killed but were just stunned. And they could remain stunned for years and then come back to life. Blood flow, increased stem cells. But he's also had 5 children with Down syndrome, so I communicated with him. This is his work that he communicated with me. Okay. And so he found one 7-year-old girl with Down syndrome was functioning at a 2.5-year level. After 40 treatments over 2 months, functioning at a 3.5-year-old level. So this is my proposed 5-square treatment, education before and after birth, biomedical before and after birth, and breastfeeding. And this is one case. This lady had this is not a lady with a fetus with Down syndrome, but she had a heart problem. She was 44. They told her not to get pregnant, or if she did, to abort. Kept the baby, no cardiac problems around the delivery. Before birth, the baby was educated in both English and Chinese, and the baby in the womb did kick on command, whether the command was in English or Chinese. The baby was crawling on the 2nd day of life, and the baby learned a Chinese song in the womb. The reading of St. Paul, you know, love is kind and not boastful and all that, that was a popular song in Taiwan. It was in Chinese. So that song was sung to the baby inside the womb, and so when this song was sung to the baby inside the womb, when the baby hears this song outside the womb, it remembers it, and you're going to see that the corner of the mouth is going to move because the baby started to smile when it hears this song. Okay, now, watch the corner of the mouth here. You should hear the father singing.
爱是恒久忍耐又有恩慈，爱是不嫉妒，爱是不自夸，不张狂，不做害羞。
Okay, and now my hands are behind the baby's feet. I'm not pushing this baby, I'm just giving this baby something to push off on. And you can see that a 2-day-old can crawl. Okay. I'm done.
Good job.